Once, in times belonging to a remote past, in a realm universally removed and far distant from our modern occupancy, there stood upon the soil, wholesome and fertile to orchard vegetation, a shrub of middling proportions, bounded by hedge and paling alike, set thereby with a sole objective, to propagate the luscious drupe which was to grow upon the boughs of the shoot in its maturity. The fruit of the tree, globular in form and orange in apparel, was pleasing to the eye, and still more so to the human tongue. The branches, slender in figure and smooth in texture, were cloaked in an emerald dress of leaves, and bore the weight of the great achenes. Established betwixt the ends of the garden in such a way that it remained equidistant from every border, the tree stood, delimited by ageless cobbles, ordered for the means of prescribing a pavement through the flora and fauna which inhabited the turf about the most robust and prolific sapling. This antediluvian avenue set forth from the little house, situated in a lone corner of the orchard, placed there for the housing and propriety of the gardener, whose task it was to tend to the vegetation within. I hailed from the manor, to which the garden was adjoined, and often betook myself down to the gardener's diminutive hovel for conversation. We frequented the orchard regularly, traversing about on the path as my companion elucidated to me the intricacies of his craft. But ne'er once had I tasted the produce of that central tree. It happened, once upon a fair July morn, that having breakfasted with the gardener, we, as was our wont, entered a conversation, impassioned in spirit and philosophical in nature. After the passing of many minutes in dispute, whilst the temper was still in his heart, he said to me, "Such logics are unfounded and foolhardy. Cowards alone make use of such tactical reasonings that play upon the passions of his fellow man." My own heart being likewise bound up in the clutch of anger, I made quick answer to his verbal defamation of my character, but in my haste to make reply, spoke rashly. "By heaven above and hell below, no man shall defame me as a coward. What would you have me do to prove my honour?" "Wouldst thou do anything I asked of you?" queried the gardener. "Anything." "There is no thing I can possibly contrive that you would not partake in readily," he questioned me again. "Nothing whatsoever." "Do you dare to eat a peach?" Thinking not of the consequences, nor of the absurdity of this seemingly meagre provocation against my pride, I immediately rose from my place at the table, traversed the floor, flung ajar the portal, and crossed the threshold into the garden. The day was warm, and the sun shone brightly, but an illusory darkness came into my eyes, causing plant and beast to assume a grim appearance. My once sure feet tread a trepidatious pace over the weather-worn cobbles, and as the tree loomed nearer and nearer in proximity, my dwindling pride receded further and further until it bore the semblance of a faint recollection. Strength of will alone impelled my increasingly reluctant steps forward into the heart of the garden. The tree being thus accosted, my reckless courage strewn about me in emotional desolation for unbeknownst reasons, I reached for the fateful peach. Its exterior was fibrous and downy, its size impeccably suited to the human appendage, and its colour most sensationally appealing to the eye. Holding it aloft for but a moment, although it seemed an age, the succulent fruit passed my lips. Pure bliss is the only description which adequately illustrates the ministration shown my palate by the peach. Salacious tremors ran from oral cavity to paunch as my entrails devoured nature's supreme confectionery raveningly. So absorbed was I in the flavour of the drupe that I passed many minutes unconscious to the exterior world. It began as a fleeting discomfort, nothing more, a slight irritation on the surface of my tongue. I scratched at it, but thinking it to be of no consequence, bit once more into the soft exterior of the peach. There was no exhilarating pleasure this time. It was as if the spark on my tongue had been blown into a flame, which now occupied the entirety of my vocal orifice. The hand holding the fruit was now joined to the mouth, as the fire spread onward as if spurred by a sudden breeze. I dropped the peach, only to find 100 bulges on the skin of my hand. Mortified, I helplessly watched this alien blemish grow up my arms and onward into unforeseeable regions. Anguished, I dropped to my knees, crying out in piteous tones for aid against my present quandary, but the gardener looked on aghast, the whole of his being petrified and inert, completely unable to make any gesture of assistance to me in my agony. Like a sundry of miniature torches, they burned my flesh all over, and I thrashed about in attempts to diminish the pain. Alas, for my efforts only gained me further hurt. Contusions formed beneath the rash, and I was helpless. The sting had transferred itself from mouth to throat, down which it was now coursing as surely as water flows from stream to channel. That initial raindrop of suffrage had transformed itself into a hurricane, raging all within, forsaking me to the winds that battered body and soul relentlessly. O vile storm! O divine deliverance! Neglect not your servant at his most needy hour! The pollenic invader ceased to move inward, but contented itself by infecting bronchi and alveoli, encircling the trachea until all exhalation was cut off from the breathing organs. Panic rose within me. Frame and extremity trembled alike as if in stroke. With wretched shudders I writhed upon the ground, unable to utter plea nor expletive in my distress. Then, just as the fire had gripped me, it ceased, replaced by a chill, the like of which cannot be found anywhere upon this earth. Thus I passed. However, before taking leave of the woeful tale, I only ask that my reader would remember this scant recollection of mine if ever he is asked, "Do you dare to eat a peach?"